often tend to see when you have an oligopoly or monopoly market, as is this one. Where we're at today is strongly encouraged by the numbers and results from the PEA. We're now on the ground working towards feasibility. And in fact, we made a little announcement here this morning, just an update with respect to our current ongoing drilling program. We have a 14-hole infill drilling program on a 50-meter by 50-meter grid over the center part of the deposit, and this will bring the meaty part of the deposit up to a measured from just indicated or inferred, and also answer some of the technical questions that the engineers need to understand as we move into the development phase and are looking at some of the mine production questions. This program will help answer that. So we do have this 14-hole drill program underway as we speak, and today we reported that we've completed the first 4 holes of that program, with the 5th and 6th holes about halfway completed as well. So we're well underway. We're nearing the halfway point on this drill program. So we're pleased with how that's all coming together. This work program is, as I said, designed to advance us towards feasibility. And our goal is, over the course of, let's say, the next year or so, as funding allows us to, we'd like to move all the way through to feasibility. To complete that, we'll need something in the neighborhood of an additional about maybe $4.5 million over and above what we've expended to this point. As we're developing the project on the ground, and at each step we're every bit or even more encouraged than we were at the step before, in terms of how bright the prospects for the project look. We do understand that with industrial minerals, it's incredibly important to work to develop your market share in tandem with developing the project on the ground. As is the case with most industrial minerals, with boron, maybe the easy part of it is getting it out of the ground. And the part that you better have a very good understanding of is who you're going to sell your material to. As I said earlier, the market is dominated by 2 very large players, Rio Tinto and Eddie Mine out of Turkey, that control about 70 to 75% of the market. And you have to understand how to fit into that market, where your market share comes from.
Just a sec there, guys. It looks like Tim's line just went dead. So let me just call him back up and get him back on the line here. One sec.
Hello, you reached the Tim.
Hanging tight. I'm sure he'll be calling me right back. His line tends to break up once in a while. He's let me know of that already. So just bear with me for a sec, and we will certainly get him back up to keep going. Should just be a sec here. There he is. Tim, we lost you. Are you back and connected there? No problem. No problem.
The dangers of modern technology sometimes. So I do apologize for that.
No, it's all good.
So as I was saying, is that with an industrial mineral project, it's important to understand and develop your potential market share in tandem with doing the work on the ground to develop the mine itself. In our case, we've come away understanding that there exists right now a hole in the market for about 200,000 tons of colemanite and about 25,000 tons of boric acid a year, and we can find a niche for ourselves to that extent without competing on a price basis or driving down prices, or for that matter, really even coming onto the radar screen of the big players that exist in the market today. So it's very important to know how you're going to break into an oligopoly and be able to find your piece of the pie. And we've been working towards that. And part of that is developing strategic partnerships. And so over the course of the last couple of years now, we have started relationships with potential strategic partners. These potential strategic partners, and unfortunately I can't go into great detail with respect to naming names and so on, because we're under very strict non-disclosure agreements with all of them. And that's due to the nature, once again, of the boron business. Very small, tight-knit group of players in the industry, and they all know what everyone else is doing, and it serves us no good whatsoever to open our hand up and lay our cards on the table for our competitors to see and understand where it is we're going to develop our market share. So to that end, we have started to cultivate relationships, but the specific details of who these various groups are, we do have to be fairly quiet about that. But suffice to say that these are some of the biggest and best players in the boron industry today, in all capacities. Some of them are folks who either understand the production side or the value-added side, such as boric acid producers. Some of them are some of the biggest consumers of borites in the world. Some of them are financial partners that do nothing but fund operations like this, but have no knowledge or interest in being a part of the operational side. And so we've been working hard to develop our potential market share. And as I mentioned earlier, we have targeted for about a 200,000 ton per year production rate. And I know that now in sitting with the various potential partners who are in the process of completing due diligence on us, the appetite that they have is well in excess of 200,000 tons a year. So there's plenty of demand to meet what we're looking at in terms of our production rates. And part of that's for a couple reasons. One that I mentioned earlier, that outside of the two big players, still a good portion of the market, about 25, maybe 30% of the market, is currently being filled by some low-level producers with inferior products out of South America. But there's a market for them because the big boys are running at capacity and really can't take on more than they have right now. We know that we can compete very successfully with some of those smaller players out of South America. So that's one market for us. Another market is that all borites are not the same. There's two principal types of boron. One is a sodium boron, one is a calcium boron. the production out of California is 100% sodium borate. The production out of South America is also has a very, very high sodium content. However, there are several big users. For example, the borosilicate glass market that I mentioned earlier, your computer screen, your smartphone screen, et cetera, that entire market greatly prefers the calcium borides because the low sodium content in the calcium borides makes for a much stronger glass. In the world today, there is only one supplier of the calcium boride called Colemanite, and that's Eddie Mine out of Turkey. So when we talk to industry buyers who buy Colemanite, and we ask them a simple question: would you be interested in an alternative supply of Colemanite? And the answer unequivocally every time is yes, of course, because they're dealing with a monopoly player right now, and so for them to have an alternative supply is something that's warmly welcomed by all the Colemanite buyers around the world. So we know that there's clearly a hole in the market that we're able to supply. And as I said, with the various strategic partners that we're sitting with, the indication is that they're very excited by the prospect of another world-class boron mine coming on stream and helping to ease the pressures from the current oligopoly that exists. I want to just quickly talk about Serbia because I know that Serbia in the past has been a country in the news and never for the right reasons. And so, for a lot of people, Serbia doesn't have the best reputation. People don't have the best memories of Serbia. That has changed substantially over the course of the last 7 to 10 years, and many things have happened that indicate how Serbia has turned around and stabilized. For example, in 2009, Serbia started the EU membership process, and in 2010 ratified a free trade agreement with the European Union, and in 2014 officially started the EU membership negotiations, and it's anticipated that they'll be accepted as a full member into the EU somewhere around 2020. Ernst & Young puts out what they call an attractiveness survey report, and in 2014, Serbia was one of the countries with the greatest capacity to attract large projects in the Balkan region. Also in 2013, Canada and Serbia signed a foreign investment promotion and protection agreement, which helps protect Canadian business companies who are doing business in Serbia. To give you an idea of who's in Serbia today, and a bit of trivia, Erin Ventures was the first foreign company to do a deal in Serbia when Serbia first opened up, and so we have that distinction. And those were lonely times when we were the only foreign company in Serbia. Well, today that's changed dramatically, and now you have a who's list of foreign investors and many world-class companies. On the mining side, you have companies like Rio Tinto and Freeport-McMoRan. Dundee Precious Metals is in there. Fiat is building cars in there. Coca-Cola and Microsoft have substantial operations. Siemens, Lafarge Cement, and actually more than 500 other companies from around the globe. Since 2000, there's been over $26 billion of foreign capital invested in Serbia. On top of that, Freeport-McMoRan has recently announced that they're preparing to invest $5 billion in opening a new copper and gold project in Serbia. Rio Tinto is spending many, many tens of millions of dollars each year, and they're in pre-feasibility for their lithium project north of us in Serbia. And on and on and on. The list goes on. Etihad Airlines paid $200 million to invest in Serbia's national airline company. The Chinese government signed an agreement to invest $2.5 billion in Serbian infrastructure projects, and on it goes. And so Serbia today is a far cry from the Serbia of old. They very much are keen in moving towards their EU membership as quickly as possible, and just normalizing life in Serbia. One of the advantages that we have operating where we are in Serbia is that it's in an area that desperately needs work, and we stand to create in excess of 100 new jobs in that area, long-term, well-paid, skilled jobs, and that's very attractive to the local community and to the government. And so for that reason, we have official endorsement from the National Miners Union. We have letters of recommendation from the local and municipal governments supporting our development of the project. And so there's a level of keenness and enthusiasm on the part of the locals to see our project advance to production stages. And the Serbian government has made it attractive as well. The corporate tax rate in Serbia is 15%, which is the lowest tax rate in Europe. They have tax treaties with Canada and other countries to avoid double taxation. And the real kicker is that we will qualify by the virtue of the size of our capital expenditure in the country. We actually qualify for a 10-year tax holiday on our profits before we're taxed at the 15% corporate tax rate. So Serbia is really, going out of their way to attract foreign capital and to be a responsible member of the international community. So I think what I'd like to do now, Chad, is maybe open this up for you and others to maybe lead the conversation in a direction that you think is important. Maybe there's some areas I haven't touched on, or some areas that I touched on, but you'd like me to expand on a little bit. So I'll let you lead the conversation, or take the conversation in the direction you'd like.
Yeah, right on, Tim. I appreciate it. There's a lot of insight there for sure. Covering a lot about the boron market, obviously. Great amount of detail about the project itself, which I'm sure is a great deal of interest to all those on the line. To those on the line, web-based for sure. By all means, please submit your questions via chat, and I can serve them up for Tim's consideration to answer those. One coming in, Tim, could you clarify a little bit more the background and experience of the management team of Erin?
Sure.
Maybe how it's come together, who the kind of key players are. Equally so, fundamentals of the company profile itself. And let's just start with that. I think would be insightful.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, we have a very experienced management team in place. Myself as president, my background is financial. My academic education is finance and accounting. I spent a number of years in brokerage industry in Western Canada prior to getting involved with public companies from this side of the fence. and I was involved on the corporate finance side in the investment world, so prior to coming to this side of the fence. And so, of course, my role is to help with the business-related decisions, the fundraising, the dealing with the public markets, as that's the world that I have been schooled in. My board of directors is comprised, first and foremost, with Dragan Ujic. Mr. Ujic is a PhD mining engineer from Serbia. When I met him, he was the national, the director of the National Mining Institute in Serbia. Now, the National Mining Institute in Serbia at that time was the quasi-government agency that was responsible for overseeing and approving of the mining licenses for all mining projects in Serbia. And so he obviously knew and understood Serbia geologically, mineralogically, like the back of his hand, and also had extensive contacts within the mining community in Serbia, and he was the one that that actually sourced this boron project for us originally. Besides him being the director of the National Mining Institute, he was the general manager of a couple of very, very large mining projects in Serbia, and ran those very, very successfully, and was involved with startup of different phases of the mine, and successfully managed the process from startup right through to depletion of the ore body and reclamation of the project. So he knows intimately every phase of operation of a mine. And he also worked as a consultant to several very large mining companies globally. Worked in places like Africa and Southeast Asia and Siberia and even North America. And so a man with tremendous wealth and knowledge with respect to mining in general and every aspect and phase of mining, along with knowing Serbia intimately, having lived there his entire life. One of my other directors is Jim Wallace, who's also a mining engineer, and Jim is from Canada and has been involved with this project as long as I have been, and he was actually for several years project manager on the ground, so he knows our boron operation better than anybody else alive does. And Jim also has an extensive pedigree when it comes to mining. One of his past jobs, it's noteworthy that he worked for Rio Tinto for a number of years, and at the boron operation in California. So he's very familiar with not only just mining in general, but specifically with boron mining operations and with Rio Tinto's U.S. borax operation in California. Aside from that, Jim has been project manager and or consultant to several world-class mining companies on projects all over the world. So again, just another wealth of knowledge and experience when it comes to running mines. Our fourth director is Vladan Milosevic, and he's also a PhD mining engineer, also from Serbia, a young man in his 40s, and he works right now as, along with being a director of Erin Ventures. He is the head of a very large mineralogical department at RTE Bor, which is the largest copper project in Europe, and he oversees a large department with respect to metallurgical issues and milling operations. And so, again, a tremendous wealth of knowledge and experience, both in mine operation and management and in Serbia. So we've got a small but very, very experienced team when it comes to building and operating mining projects.
Nice. And as we can flow from that, Tim, and I appreciate it, into maybe the fundamentals of the company a bit, as we're speaking about management. There's some more questions to come, obviously, as well, but it feels like natural flow to me. What is management's ownership position in the company? What percentage of holdings is held by management?
Sure.
Ballpark. I won't hold you to it, but maybe maybe just back of a napkin there, if you can put an approximate number on it out of curiosity.
Sure. So I know that that I personally have in the neighborhood of 4.5 million shares directly held. And I'm just trying to recall off the top what the other directors currently hold. I would suggest that between us, so right now we've got about 250 million shares outstanding, and so collectively, unfortunately I have to just guess at this right now because I don't have the numbers in front of me for the other gentleman, but I would suggest that it's probably in the neighborhood of about 5%.
Okay. And any other major shareholders you could speak to? There must be some, I guess, long-term, medium, and long-term supporters, holders that are around the story.
Yeah, we certainly do. We have, I guess, you could almost describe them as a zealous core group of shareholders. And we actually went through the exercise not so long ago, and of course there was a bit of guesswork involved with it, but we feel that you're probably looking at not more than about 50 people holding somewhere close to about 40% of the company. Yeah, we did go through the exercise, and I don't have the numbers in front of me, so I have to apologize for that. But it was substantial. We can pick up the phone and directly access with people we know well in excess of half the issuing outstanding shares. We know the folks well, and many of them have been with us for many years. So we do have a very knowledgeable and patient and supportive group of core shareholders. So that's been one of our strongest assets in my opinion.
Nice. What about cash on hand currently for the company? Is there any cash in the treasury there to continue to advance?
Okay, so we recently closed a convertible debenture offering, and that put $675,000 into the Treasury, which is earmarked for this work program that's underway now. So we're drawing down on those funds as we speak to complete this current work phase on the ground. And so we've probably at this point expanded a couple $100,000 of that money, and the rest will go into the ground over the course of the next couple of months here. We are looking to do some additional funding. We are looking at another tranche of the debenture offering, and we've got some good expression of interest on it at this point. And so I would hope, if all goes well, that we can close another tranche over the course of the next few weeks.
Okay. That said, would the current cash on hand be sufficient to cover your existing infill drill program?
The cash on hand takes us through to the end of this work program, and that keeps everything in good standing with respect to our license, and certainly helps advance the project as well. But we want to continue moving forward. We feel that we create the most value for our shareholders by completing work on the ground that advances the project as far as possible, and hopefully right through to feasibility. At the same time that we're doing the work on the ground, we are, as I mentioned earlier, working with potential strategic partners, some of whom may or may not put forward an offer to work with us in some fashion, through joint venture or direct equity investment in us, or whatever. We've always felt that our position of strength with these potential partners increases dramatically once we get through to feasibility level. Now, if the right offer came along today, of course we would accept it. But we believe that our position of strength grows tremendously once we reach feasibility stage. So that's our goal, is to continue to advance the project on the ground to feasibility stage.
And that said, what is the timeline? If you could share your vision there, what is the timeline to feasibility?
Timeline to get through to feasibility?
Yeah.
Beyond this work program, we would have for sure another year worth of work on the ground. Some of that just can't be rushed. There's no way to speed it up. For example, part of what we need to complete in feasibility stage is a baseline environmental study. And the way that study is set up, if the process goes absolutely perfectly, it's still going to take 10 months, let's say. And there's just no way to expedite that. And so some things are a function of cash. For example, when you're doing a drill program, if you deploy 2 drills, you'll finish the drilling twice as fast as if you deploy 1 drill, and so on. But other steps in the process are more serial, they're lineal, and there's no way to expedite them. And a good example of that is environmental. So the work that needs to happen on the ground to advance to feasibility, and this is beyond the phase that we're doing right now. is about another year's worth of work, and about, as I said, another maybe $4.5 million to get us there.
Okay. Let me just see here. What were the underlying terms of the project? Could you clarify what the underlying terms of the acquisition were initially? I understand you own 100% of this, correct?
Yeah. So we have 100%, but it's just a straightforward exploration license. So we didn't acquire. We were just granted a license.
Okay.
So if you're asking what the terms were in terms of cost to us, nothing. Just making application on the license. The way the license process works in Serbia, it's a 3-year exploration license. At the end of which, if you've met certain exploration goals, you can apply for and be granted an additional 2 years of time to complete the work as is required. So you're given a total of 5 years to complete the work. There's some new mining laws that are at the draft stage right now. We've seen the latest drafts of it, and we're being told that they're going to be approved by the Serbian parliament shortly. Not sure exactly what timing shortly is, but nonetheless, they are suggesting that they're going to pass these new laws shortly, and that will improve some of the existing laws. And one of them, for example, is that rather than the current 3+2 year exploration program that you're granted, under the new laws, you would have up to, I believe, it was 8 years to complete all the work on the ground. So, but no, as it stands today, we have a 3-year mandate and then 2 1-year extensions to complete exploration phase.
Okay. Couple questions I think you touched on a bit, but are worthy of maybe just touching on quickly again. Specifically, what's the primary driver of demand in the boron market?
The biggest single chunk of the pie for boron right now is the glass market, either fiberglass or textile glass or borosilicate glass or the ceramics. And when you add just the glasses themselves is about 50% of the global consumption market, and ceramics is another about 13%. So between the ceramics and glasses, you've got about 64%, let's say, of the global demand. So that's a very, very significant piece of the pie today. And those demographics, are continually shifting. Sometimes you'll find some of the historical uses, like, for example, one of the older uses I mentioned was as a laundry detergent. Today, there's been several substitute products that have been developed that make boric acid-based laundry detergents less in demand than they were, let's say, 50 years ago. And so oftentimes you'll find there'll be situations where one demand is subsiding because of changing consumer desires or substitute products, but at the same time, other demands are coming on stream that replace the demand that was lost. And so, so as we sit today, the glass market
I appreciate that, and I'm sure the guys do too. Just a little clarification there. Another question coming in, just requesting a bit of a run through. Again, I know you touched on it earlier as well, but if you could just run through kind of maybe point by point of the highlights of that PEA again, that SRK report. I think there's a couple of people out there just polishing up their notes on that. So if you could just give us a couple of little high-level bullets on that PEA again, I would appreciate it.
Sure. Okay, I can certainly do that. I'll try to do it without being too overwhelming with the numbers. But I think the key numbers in the PEA. First, the benchmark that everybody likes to use to compare one project against the next is the net present value and the internal rate of return. In our case, once again, using a 10% discount rate, SRK calculated our net present value to be $428 million after tax, and that equates to an IRR of 64% on the project. Anybody that looks at a number of PEAs or pre-feasibility studies or feasibility studies will know that with mining projects, it's the norm to see rates of return that are in the 20 to 30% range, and those are considered good, strong, viable projects. Occasionally, you'll see a project with an IRR of 40% or slightly higher, but those are extremely rare. And to have an IRR of 64%, like ours has, it's very, very impressive to say the least. So two of the key numbers are 428 million current net present value after tax, 64% internal rate of return, project payout on the capital expenditure of 15 months from startup, mine life 21 years of operation, operating at about $97 million per year. So what's that equate to these days? About 120 million Canadian per year for the next 21 years. Gross project revenue over the life of the mine of just over $2 billion. Net project cash flow of $1.1 billion. That's net of all costs, including capital expenditure, operating costs, taxes, you name it. So net project cash flow of $1.1 billion over the life of the mine. Net operating margin of about 68.7%, meaning for every dollar's worth of boron that we pull out of the ground, our cost against that is roughly 32 cents, and the other 68 cents we put into our pocket. Capital expenditure, $84.5 million, including a boric acid plant and a 20% contingency rate. All-in cost per ton of product sold after tax of $165 per ton, against the current market price of about $500 a ton. So to me, that's the most telling market. What you're looking at with that number is your downside in pricing before you hit a break even on your profitability. So from the current price of $500 a ton, the price could fall all the way to $165 before we're finally in a position where we would no longer be making money. The other thing that I didn't mention before is that all these numbers in the PEA are based on a very conservative culminate price of $400 per ton. The actual market price is about $500 a ton and growing, but SRK, wanting to be conservative with the numbers, chose to use a $400 price tag. So they grossly undervalued what our revenue would look like by using a very conservative number. The other thing is our deposit remains open in two directions. We have not found the full extent of the deposit yet. So as we sit today, we have the 5.6 million tons indicated at a 30% P2O3 content, and another 6.2 million tons of inferred. But to the west and the south, the deposit remains open and untested. And in the last drill holes that we drilled in each of those directions, we were still in strong mineralization. So there's every possibility that the deposit is larger than what we know it is today. The other thing that I should mention is that we control the exploration rights to the entire basin that we're located in, called the Garandal Basin, which is about 34 square miles, something that size. 34 square kilometers. And there have been indications of sightings of boron in other parts of the basin. For example, a farmer would drill a water well, and as they're drilling the water well on the other side of the basin, they would hit boron in it. That sort of anecdotal evidence. Also, I should mention that directly on the other side of the basin from us, so about 2.5 to 3 kilometers away from our project, is another tiny little boron project that's owned by the Serbian government. The land between these two deposits, between our large deposit and their small deposit, all that land in between belongs to us and is untested. And there's some thinking by our geological team that there could very well be some continuity between those two deposits, meaning we could find extensions in between these two deposits that show it to be, if not one large deposit, it could in fact be other smaller deposits located in between. So there certainly remains good possibility for resource expansion. And so when you start playing with some of these net present value, these PEA numbers, like for example the net present value, for example the 428 million U.S. net present value represents about 30 times our current share price. So in other words, our net present value as calculated by SRK is 30 times what our current market price is. So that shows some pretty significant upside. If you use the true value of colemanite, which is about 500 a ton instead of the 400 a ton that they chose to use, our net present value actually jumps up from $428 million to about $586 million. Or in other words, shows a net present value which is about 45 times what our current market price is. So there's certainly some tremendous potential upside for us. And the real take-home lesson from the PEA is that this is a project that all indications are will create tremendous cash flow. Again, we pay off all construction costs and equipment within the first 15 months of operation, and then gross $100 million a year for the next 21 years. So an incredibly rich cash flowing project. So those are really the highlight numbers from the PEA.
For sure. Another question jumping in. I appreciate that clarity and insight. Question coming in for you, which is valid. All this sounds great. thoughts on the current valuation of the company, share price, particularly is the question coming in for you here. Any thoughts on that, on the current valuation, where the company sits, or as described, the low share price, I guess, is the question.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. I mean, obviously, my first comment is that I'm disappointed with the current market capitalization we have, the current share price. I don't believe that the current share price even begins to reflect, the true value or the potential value in this project, and it's at least in part a reflection of the times that we're in. These are difficult years for junior mining companies in particular, but for all mining companies in general. And I think one of the best analogies I've heard is that when the tide goes out, all the boats go down. The big yachts go down and the dinghies go down. I think that based on the value in the ground, we're one of the big yachts. We've shown some real value, but the market conditions are difficult. That's not been in our favor. But another thing that has been difficult for us, and this might be hard for some of our long-term hardcore shareholders to understand, because they've been around this story for a long time, and some of them I'm sure know more about boron than I do. But boron is a very strange animal, and it's a very niche market. And we sit time and time again in front of different mining analysts, or different institutional investors, or different potential strategic partners, and they all come away saying the same thing. The numbers look tremendous, look terrific, but we don't understand boron, we don't do boron, we don't do industrial minerals, and so we have to pass. We've heard that many times, too many times, and so I like to say and think that if we have these sorts of numbers, an IRR of 64% and net present value of well over 400 million, et cetera, if we had those sorts of numbers and we were a gold project, life would be so much easier for us, because gold projects is something that the market understands, or believes, thinks they understand, at least, whether or not they really do, and have the ability to quickly assess and analyze. But because we're in a special material that is difficult for people to get their head around, it hurts us. For example, if we were a gold company, you could literally pull up dozens and dozens of comparable companies and do an analysis of here's what they've got in the ground, here's what their costs look like, here's their market cap, and by doing that exercise, figure out what we're worth. You can't do that with the boron market, because there are no other boron companies out there. Sure, you have, as I said, Rio Tinto, but the boron numbers are very deep inside the consolidated financials, and so you really don't know how to assess the profitability of Rio Tinto's boron operation. The Turkish government, who's the other big boron player, of course, they don't publish any of their numbers. On the junior side, there's really a tiny handful of other players in the boron industry, and none of them with a project that is at the advanced stage that ours is. And then the other problem with some of the other smaller public companies that have a boron component is that they have other projects in them. They'll either have a lithium project or some other mineral project that's adding value to their market capitalization. And so it's very, very difficult to find a pure boron play to compare us to. And these things all hurt us. And so while we're making the rounds with the various institutions and analysts and so on, to find that target market is it's a challenge. So recently, Stormco Capital, whose senior analyst is John Highway, have decided to write up the boron market. And John Highway is one of the most respected analysts when it comes to the specialty materials, minerals. He's credited as being one of the first analysts anywhere to recognize the future potential in lithium. Back in the days when lithium was nothing more than a mood-altering drug, and he saw that there was this huge untapped potential market for lithium, and started following it and recommending some of the companies who had lithium projects, and so that garnered John a fair bit of acknowledgement from the investment community for his acumen in finding some out of the way quirky industrial mineral or specialty metal deals. And he's now decided to follow boron, and so we think that will help us out tremendously, because he is a highly regarded analyst, and the fact that he thinks boron is a material worth studying will certainly get other analysts and institutions looking at boron as well. So it's more of a learning curve, certainly, with boron than it is if we were in another material, and so that's I think been a big problem for us in garnering some attention. Another problem is, again, due to the nature of the boron business, it's a small and secretive business, and there's a lot of information that cannot be shared publicly because we would forego any sort of competitive advantage that we would have. And again, talking about companies like Rio Tinto or Eni Mine in Turkey, try to find any meaningful data with regards to their sales or their pricing or their customer base or their strategies, and you won't find it. You'll find some general backward-looking PR material that talks very generally about boron and so on and so forth, but any meaningful strategic material, they obviously don't publish it. We're in the same situation, with respect to the potential strategic partners that we're dealing with. They don't want their name publicized because, for the same reason, because it's a small market, and for them to give up any strategic advantage by openly talking about new projects that we're getting involved with and so on and so forth, there's just no advantage for them to do so. And same with us. And so, unfortunately, a lot of the strategic information, for competitive reasons, we cannot at this point, and maybe never, will be able to publicly acknowledge and release some of this information. So all these things make it more of a challenge for us to capture the attention of the marketplace and find valuations that are closer to what we believe they really should be.
Appreciate that answer. Another question comes in relation to that then. which I think is an extension and a valid question, though you've provided a lot of insight and answer to what the challenges are in relation to share price and valuation. I mean, obviously this always comes up, right? Long-term projects like this, certainly, look, someone buys the stock, it's valid. When do we make a profit on this, and when do we, realize a big win, right? Certainly from my perspective, it looks like there's a lot of really interesting, highlights here that warrant attention on the company and the project. So the question is, what have you done specifically, I guess, and what do you think still needs to be done to increase the profile of the company? And let me say this, just to maybe paraphrase the question a bit, so the share price reflects the value that the project presents, but the part I'm paraphrasing a bit is obviously, without saying what you think the company is worth, other than what SRK puts in its numbers, we understand you can't really answer that and say, well, I think the share price should be X and this good stuff. What have you done, and what do you think needs to be done? And then I guess an extension of that in the question here is the question, what do you think will be a catalyst, the near-term, medium-term catalyst that will help increase the market cap of the company?
Okay. So taking this in the order you asked it, so what have we done? Different things at different times. Over the course of the last year and a half, we've engaged the services of several different IR groups or promotional groups, including Frontier Capital and Ubica and a few different letter writers. We've also engaged the services of Stormcrow to introduce us to potential institutional investors and to create some market awareness on Boron and us. And so we have spent actually a substantial amount of time and money over the last, let's say, year and a half now, trying to create more awareness with varying degrees of success at various times.
And we lost Tim again there, guys. So, ladies and gents, so just bear with me a minute. I'm sure he's going to call back in just a second, maybe finish up that answer for us. Take the opportunity, if you guys have any other questions, please ping them my way. We've been on the call for a while. I know some of you have been with us and patient. I appreciate it, and just want to make sure we get some last questions in, wrapped up, and we can go on from there. So, yeah, Tim, as you were, we lost you again for a second.
Yeah, sorry about that. And so there has been, a conscious and concerted effort to create more public awareness, and the seeds have been planted, but they need to be nurtured and watered and cultivated, and it takes time for sure. And so to this point, we've seen little result from the efforts that have been made over the last year, but there's a multitude of new people, from investors to analysts to institutions to potential partners that are aware of us, aware of Boron, that weren't aware a year ago. People aren't as quick to react in the markets today as they were in years gone by, and so I think it's fair to say that there's an ever-growing audience who is watching over our shoulder, watching the developments, and at some point, we'll reach a threshold that convinces at least some of them to jump into our market. Nothing replaces fundamentals, though. Nothing. You need to do the work on the ground. You need to advance the project, and that ultimately, at the end of the day, is the best way and only way to attract real attention and see the sort of market capitalization that we all believe Erin deserves to have. And so for us, that means continuing to do the work on the ground and advance this project through to a feasibility level and beyond. But each milestone and the next big milestone being feasibility adds a whole layer of credibility and security, and attracts a whole new audience to the project that we just don't have today. The other thing that obviously would help tremendously is a strategic partner. And we've been working in earnest for the last couple of years to cultivate strategic partnerships. And we do have a great number of very strong potential partners at the table who are all doing their due diligence, who are all looking at us, who are all interested in the developments, and they all have their timing and their reasoning for when they may or may not choose to approach us with a concrete offer for a strategic alliance. But that certainly would help our cause as well tremendously. And so we have to just continue doing what we're doing, which is building value on the ground, and at the same time diverting some of our resources away from furthering the project on the ground and diverting them towards creating some market awareness. And it's not inexpensive. You can easily spend $500,000 a year just through a couple different IR groups and PR groups doing work with you to help create awareness, without there being a whole lot of short-term results from that effort. And when you're a company with very limited resources, and that's $500,000 that could go a long ways to advancing the project on the ground, now it becomes an important decision that management has to make. That do we use the money to advance the project, or use the money to talk about the project? And both are important, but finding that balancing act is not always easy.
Mm-hmm. No, that's fair. It's a good answer, Tim. I appreciate it. Always a tough question to answer, but always obviously and surely a valid one to ask. We've been on a while, and I really appreciate your time here. I think you've walked through really A to Z what's going on with Erin from my perspective.
Sure.
Questions from attendees have quietened down and dried up for the most part here. Okay. So the attendees have certainly been attentive and stuck around for the full presentation as well, which I appreciate.
Yeah, and I greatly appreciate that. The one thing we certainly have very patient and tenacious group of shareholders, and we do greatly appreciate their ongoing support. And it's project like this is only successful because of the efforts of a large group of people, and the shareholders are included in that group. So I certainly appreciate the attendance here today.
No doubt. We had great attendance today, so I appreciate everybody coming by and offering Tim your time to walk through the story and everything that's going on. Pretty clear from my perspective. The opportunity, the challenges, and what really needs to be accomplished to help trigger some attractive advances in the project and in your journey here. So, from Frontier's perspective, we'll obviously be chatting more about that, and we'll do our best to help to maybe wrap some of this stuff up. Again, I'm Chad McMillan. I'm with Frontier Merchant Capital Group. Erin Ventures is a portfolio company and a client of ours. It's our opportunity today to offer Erin and Tim and his team an opportunity to chat about everything they're up to. All the appropriate disclaimers certainly valid here. Any forward-looking statements that may have been mentioned in the presentation, certainly subject to various risks, some controllable, some uncontrollable, including commodity prices, access to capital, and the like. We may or may not own securities in the company, which we reserve the right to buy or sell at our own discretion. If you're listening and considering any form of investment or otherwise in Erin Ventures or any of our portfolio companies, of course, this isn't a solicitation to buy or sell securities, and we certainly recommend you speak with an investment advisor to determine suitability for your own portfolio. So that said, that would be a wrap from my side. Tim, once again, thank you very much. To all that attended, thank you all very much, and we wish you all a great day and look forward to seeing you next time.
Okay. Thanks, Chad. Bye now.
Right on. Thanks, Tim.